Today, I'd like to talk about another line from the text, the 7-point mind training, which is full of these wonderful one-line pieces of advice on how to make our mind more altruistic, more kind, compassionate, and less self-centered. And I'm not going through these in any particular order. It's just picking one that seems appropriate for the moment. So the one I'm going to talk about today is this: don't seek others' misery as a means of your own happiness. Well, this might seem obvious, kind of an obvious no-no. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we might find ourselves doing it sometimes, not deliberately or consciously, but just our mind doing that. So I know I do. And it's something we might be tempted to do now with what's going on in our country, with the election process, which seems to be a never-ending election process. We might be feeling happy if our candidate won and the other one lost, and also when that one gets criticized in the media by other politicians and so on. And also another situation where this can happen is when criminals are caught and put into prison or even executed. So when these kind of things happen, a little voice inside of us may say, ha ha, you got what you deserved. We showed you. And I remember doing this as a child when one of my siblings would do something naughty, and I'd go running to mom and report on them, and full of pride and self-righteousness. And then mom would go and tell that person off, and I'd be standing behind her kind of smirking. And once mom had gone away, I'd say something like, I told you so, sort of rubbing it in, adding insult to injury. So what's going on there? One thing is a huge lack of empathy and kindness and compassion, and maybe even the opposite of compassion, cruelty, actually delighting in the suffering or humiliation of someone that we see as an enemy or a rival. And then deeper down, of course, there's the ego, big fat me, the center of the universe, who's always out to get more than everyone else, to do better than everyone else, to always be right and always be on top, get the top prize. So why do we have that attitude? I think it's because we want happiness, and we think that's the way to find happiness. That's going to bring the happiness that I want. But is that true? I mean, maybe we get a little bit of a thrill for a few moments, but what kind of happiness is that when it's at the expense of others? Is it the genuine, deep down kind of happiness that lasts all throughout our life? Whenever we remember that incident and feel, oh, that was such a good thing to do. I'm so proud of myself. Probably not. I'm sure later we feel ashamed of how we acted, how we felt. So I think there's just a lot of confusion in our mind about what is real happiness and what is fake happiness. I think that's fake happiness. And I think Buddhism would say that it's actually suffering. That kind of feeling of rejoicing when someone else is suffering is itself suffering. So it's a case of mistaken identity, mistaking suffering for happiness. And in case anyone thinks this is just a normal human trait, everyone's like that, I don't think that's true. Because a woman that I know told me about her 10-year-old son who was learning some martial art like karate, and he would sometimes be in competitions. And when he won a competition, he didn't feel happy. He felt sad because he realized the other child was unhappy. And he didn't want that. He didn't want to make the other child be unhappy. So he's more concerned for others than for himself. He wasn't concerned about winning. 10 years old. So there are people, even children, who don't have this attachment to winning, to being on top, to being right, and don't care about how that affects others. Buddhism would say this is due to strong imprints from the past, from past lives. So if it's wrong to be happy over another person's unhappiness or loss, does that mean we should wish everyone to always get their way? I started thinking about that a few months ago when I saw how intensely President Trump wanted to win this election. He was putting a huge amount of time and energy and money into getting reelected. And I thought about how unhappy he would be if he lost. So I wondered, should I wish him to win? Should I even vote for him so he can experience that happiness and not have the suffering of losing? Would that be the right thing to do if I really have loving kindness for him? So one time many years ago, I was giving a talk about loving kindness and explaining how it means we wish others to have happiness and to have everything they need in order to be happy and so on. And one woman in the audience put up her hand and talked about her mother, saying that her mother was never satisfied with what she has. She always wants more and more things, more clothes, hats, jewelry, shoes, things in her house, and so on. So the woman asked, so should I wish my mother to have all of those things that she wants, more and more and more and more? So this was something I never thought of. Probably because I don't know anyone like that. I mean, all the people in my family and my circle of friends are kind of content with having a few things, simple things, just enough, and not having this sort of insatiable greed. So I'd never been confronted with that kind of attitude. But when I thought about her question, I thought perhaps the best thing would be for her to wish her mother to have contentment, satisfaction, this inner quality of being happy, being content with what she has, because that's what she really needed in order to be happy, not more and more stuff. So I think maybe it's similar here in this current situation. The current president thinks that being reelected will make him happy, but is that really the case? Is that really the best thing for him and for everyone else? Because the opponent also wants to win. And he would be unhappy if he lost. So somebody's going to be unhappy in this situation, and also their followers. In a situation like this, an election, it's impossible to reach an outcome in which absolutely everybody will be happy, will get what they want. And from the Buddhist point of view, it makes more sense to think in terms of which candidate will bring the most benefit to others, to the country, to the world. And not just short-term benefit, but long-term benefit. Of course, different people will have different ideas about who that candidate is, who will be able to bring the most benefit. But that's why we have a vote, and we go with the majority, the democratic process. And we can also wish the loser to not suffer, to not have that mental unhappiness, and instead to have a transformation of their mind, so that their mind becomes free of the real causes of suffering: self-centeredness, ego, attachment to winning, aversion to losing. So if their mind could transform and be happy whether they win or lose, that would be the ideal thing. And we can do the same with criminals. People who committed a crime and have been imprisoned or about to be executed. We can wish and pray and dedicate merit for their mind to change, that they acknowledge and regret their wrongdoings, make amends, change their behavior so that they are more ethical, empathic, kind, and so on. So anyway, back to the original topic. Since it's inevitable that some people will be unhappy in a situation like an election or in a court case, according to mind training, or Lojong, we just need to be very careful to not rejoice in the unhappiness of others, the loss of others. So that's a kind of negative rejoicing. So if such thoughts or feelings arise, I mean, it's normal. We're just human beings. We're not Buddhas. So we don't need to beat ourselves up. And to counteract such thoughts, we can put ourselves in the other person's shoes and imagine how we would feel if we were in that situation, especially if you see people kind of rejoicing, smirking, making jokes about you or your candidate. So we can remember the universal golden rule: don't do to others what we wouldn't want others to do to us, and do to others what we would want others to do to us. So the story behind this text, the 7-point mind training, kind of relates to this idea, because the author of the text, Geshe Chekawa, came across this other mind training text, the 8 verses of mind training. And he was particularly intrigued by verse number 5, which says, "When others out of jealousy mistreat me with abuse, slander, and so on, I will practice accepting defeat and offering the victory to them." So apparently the idea of accepting defeat and offering the victory to others really grabbed him. And he actually set out on a journey to try to find the author of that text and get teachings from him. Unfortunately, the author had already passed away, but he did find a disciple of the author being Geshe Langri Tangpa, and he found a disciple named Geshe Sharawa. So he did manage to study with a disciple of the author of the text. So he learned the thought training teachings and studied and practiced them, and then he wrote this text, the 7-point mind training. So it is a difficult thing to do, giving up attachment to winning and let others win. But it's not impossible, especially with these Lojong teachings and practices. And it's also really rewarding. It enables us to have more empathy, more kindness, more compassion, less ego, less self-centeredness. So it's good for others, but it's also good for ourselves. So once again, this line, and this time it's a slightly different translation in these Lojong cards from Shambhala publications. It says, "Don't seek others' pain as the limbs of your own happiness." And Venerable Pema Chodron's commentary, "Don't build your happiness on the suffering of others." So let's try to keep this in mind and use it to subdue our ego, our self-centeredness, our desire to always be the winner, to always be right, and use it to increase our compassion and kindness for others, especially when they are in the loser's position.